Welcome to the first session of the second day of our ISBS conference. And for this session, the theme for this session is GNH and development, basically on how GNH is put into practice. And for this session, we have the chair as Schuelka, and Schuelka is a member of parliament of the National Council, which is the upper house, and he is currently serving his third term as an eminent member of the National Council, which is appointed by His Majesty the King. Schuelka is a chair of the Finance and Economic Affairs Committee, as well as a member of Foreign Relations Committee of the Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to also extend a warm welcome. I was, since this location is away from Bhutan, I was worried whether there will be enough people participating here, but I'm very heartened to see many people have turned up. This goes on to show and reinforce the importance of the idea of gross national happiness and its growing popularity beyond the borders of Bhutan. This morning, to share their ideas on GNH and development, we have three very eminent speakers and researchers to help us navigate on the idea of GNH and development. And I do not need to make further introduction on the idea of GNH and its relevance to development. All I would like to state is that each speaker will speak for 20 minutes. We'll go through the three speakers, and then we will have a question and answer, all of them together at the end for about half an hour. I would like to request all the speakers to stick to your time, and Jigme here will indicate when you have 5 minutes left and when you have 2 minutes left, or when you have 1 minute left. Thank you. The first speaker we have today is Matthew Schuelka. Dr. Matthew Schuelka is a lecturer in inclusive education and also serves as the program director for inclusion and special education needs at the University of Birmingham. He has an extensive research experience in the field of education and has worked in various research and development projects spanning from the United States to Serbia, Zambia, India, Japan, Malaysia, and is focused presently on working on special education in Bhutan with the partnerships at the Royal University of Bhutan at the Paro College of Education. Dr. Matthew Schuelka, without much further delay, your 20 minutes starts.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about education in Bhutan, but I'm going to try not to provide as much context as I usually do in these talks, since I think everyone is at least a little bit familiar with education in Bhutan. I'm going to talk a little bit about the trajectory of education in Bhutan and a few of the projects that I've been involved with, and some of the messages that we see in terms of where education for GNH is going and some of the challenges and opportunities that provides. When I first started my field work in Bhutan almost 7 years ago now, this quote really was the guiding force in what I was looking at, what I was interested in. Youth tend everywhere to occupy the innovative, uncharted borderlands along which the global meets the local. And I think in Bhutan this is particularly interesting to look at youth, modern youth. Where are they going? Where have they come from? What are we to do with them? Are they lost? Are they found? Where are they going? And that's what I'm interested in primarily. A lot of my early focus was on children with disabilities in Bhutan, but I've also, I'm interested in all youth. and in the quality of education in Bhutan and how that supports all children. So really you can tell the story of education in Bhutan in really two charts. This probably isn't a surprise to most of you. But if you look at even just the last 60 years, the trajectory of education in Bhutan has been enormous. Going from almost no students in formal education, modern formal education in 1961, at the start of the first five-year plan, to almost 200,000 students today. So those of you that know Bhutan know that's about a quarter of the entire population of Bhutan in school, in some form of school, which is an amazing statistic. And almost no other country can compare to that. But with that growth presents a lot of enormous challenges for Bhutan. Resources, teachers, what are we going to teach them? What are they going to learn? Where are they going to go to school? How are they going to get there? So there are a lot of challenges in this very fast growth that Bhutan has experienced. So I'll just quickly sum up some of the key points in the history of education in Bhutan. When education started, formal education, and of course I want to make a distinction between modern formal education and monastic education, which has a much longer history. But here I'm talking about the kind of secular modern education that happens supported by the government. The Hindi curriculum was the first, most of the curriculum was borrowed from India or directly taken from India with Indian teachers attached. And they've come into Bhutan in the early 50s, 60s, and 70s with books in Hindi, and Hindi was one of the primary languages of the country, the schooling in the country. Of course, there's another history there of Canadian Jesuit priests teaching, and many of you are familiar with that history. In the 1980s, there was a period of Bhutanization in the curriculum. So the curriculum changed then to be in Dzongkha and English. And today the curriculum is mostly in English, with some Dzongkha being used particularly in ISBS or environmental science and in Dzongkha classes, of course. The Royal University of Bhutan was created in 2003 when it broke away from Delhi University. And in the past 10 years, we've seen lots of new initiatives, modern education initiatives, such as early childhood education, special and inclusive education, and a greater attention towards the quality of education and the quality of teachers, particularly. So that's just a whistle-stop tour of the history of education in Bhutan. Bhutan has experienced many successes in its education trajectory. It was one of the earliest countries to meet its education for all targets within the UN. One of the only countries to do so, actually. So Bhutan has had great success in getting students into school. Bhutan also experiences gender parity in its classrooms, so that the ratio of females to males is roughly equal. And it's actually, maybe it's problematic in that it's skewing the other way. So the females are pulled away from males in attendance. So there are more females, particularly in tertiary education. Everyone has the right to a basic education through class 10, according to the Constitution. And previously marginalized populations, such as children with disabilities, have now been more involved and included in schools. However, there are also challenges with this kind of growth. The push for greater school enrollment has not led to the comparable amount of resources. So the number of teachers, classroom, student-to-teacher ratios have, in some places, are nearly 50, 60 to 1. In some places, it's a lot less than that. So it's very uneven in its growth. Some of the curricular materials, it's great difficulty to get out to the schools. Many of the schools that I visited had curricular materials from the 1980s and hadn't been updated. And I'm going to talk about this more in future slides, but the pedagogy and curriculum has had a hard time moving into the 21st century. And what we think about as quote-unquote 21st century skills, which is a phrase I hear a lot in Bhutan these days. there is an increasing inequality in terms of educational opportunity and access, particularly now that the expectation is that all students or all children are going to school. Some children have more opportunities than others. There's a disconnect between schooling and outcomes. So there's been a lot of talk in the last 15 years about the youth and the youth problem, youth unemployment, lots of graduates from RUB without jobs, running around Timbuktu causing problems. Some of that is a story we tell, some of that is truth. But there's a disconnect also between the role of school and the traditional role of school. In that the traditional role of schooling, of kind of formal schooling, was to prepare a certain elite amount of students, the toppers, the top students, into the civil service. But in Bhutan, that's not possible anymore in 2019. So if we look at what the policy says it wants to do, and this is what I'm particularly interested in, because this is what I think the promise of education in Bhutan is what is it that they want their students to achieve? So this is from the education blueprint that came out a couple of years ago. According to student attributes range from knowledge and understanding and intellectual competence, all the way to things like spirituality and character, well-being, leadership, and world readiness. So this presents a picture of a very well-rounded student, according to policy. There are things like the Education for GNH initiative, and things like here the GNH Education Mandala. It's really promoting the sense of balance in the student, the wholeness of the student, the home, the head, the heart, the hands of the student as the purpose and goal of education. And of course, there's also been the kind of Green Schools initiative from previous government several years ago that's still very prevalent and present in Bhutan. This was taken in September. Most schools have these kinds of signs outside their walls. I don't know if you can read it here, if you're unfamiliar with the Green Schools. But it's green in every sense of the word: academic greenery, cultural greenery, spiritual greenery, aesthetic greenery, natural greenery. I think there are 9 of them. 8 or 9 of them. So like I said, I'm going to sum up several projects, both ongoing and that I've done just in the past. One project we did a couple of years ago was asking teachers, what is it that they saw was the point of what they did? What was the goal of education for them? And what kind of skills did they see themselves teaching for their students? Like I just presented, there are these initiatives for education for gross national happiness. All teachers have gone to trainings and workshops, and it's supposed to be part of their remit. But most teachers don't understand what that means in practice, in the classroom. They didn't necessarily view their role as a role model for their students. There's a lot of do what I say, don't do what I do in these classrooms. And teachers, of course, they're self-aware of this practice, and they know. But they primarily saw themselves as the deliverer of curriculum, of content. They need to get through the syllabus. Okay? That's their primary goal. And then we asked, if you were to introduce Bhutanese values, non-cognitive skills, things, spiritual values, where would that take place in your classroom? Most teachers saw that as being outside their responsibility. Of course, they said, they do teach certain values within the schools, but it's not in the curriculum itself. It's outside of it. It's either extracurricular or it's separate. And they said that if we wanted to include things like teaching values, and there have been various initiatives like the Universal Human Values Education Model, it needs to be tested. It needs to be graded and marked as part of the curriculum in order for them to see the point of value of it. So the current project I'm involved in looks deeper into the kind of curricular and pedagogical ways in which teachers in schools express this kind of purpose of education in Bhutan. This is a partnership between my university, Nagoya University in Japan, and the Royal University of Bhutan. Just a few takeaways, because this is still pretty preliminary. But many teachers spoke of the resource trap. So they said, if we had more, we could do more. Okay? If we had more stuff, more books, more lab equipment. And of course, some of this is true. And some of this is perhaps a block in, there's not, I don't need to change my practice, I just need new things. Okay? This isn't unique to Bhutan, of course. Teachers don't see their role as teaching all students. And one particularly interesting quote from a teacher said, how can we teach 21st century pedagogy with 20th century curriculum? Okay. So maybe there is a little bit to that resource idea. How can we use these new skills that we're supposed to be doing, these kind of student-centered learning, with curriculum that's not meant to support learning like that? So some teachers, of course, are trying to implement new things. Here's a group work activity in a village school, fairly rural boarding school, kind of a science exploration for the students. But of course, this is probably more familiar of a scene in Bhutan. This is an English class, so they're discussing a story, and the teacher is telling the students how to think about it. You notice the ratio here is about 50 students to one teacher. Okay. This is a chemistry class, and this teacher had a point in that he wants to do more chemistry experiments, but doesn't have the materials to do it. So here he's just lecturing about catalytic. I'm not a chemistry person. Catalytic processes. And he said he'd love to just show them how to, what to do if they add materials to water, how to get it to boil. So he does what he can. So there is this culture of competition in schools, which I would argue runs counter to the kind of point of GNH education. And part of this is just this culture that's been imported into Bhutan from the kind of Indian model or Indian system, which in a way is kind of the British system transposed into India and then transposed here, or into Bhutan. So there's this competitive school culture that in some ways holds education back in Bhutan to achieving its kind of gross national happiness agenda. Students are viewed as being either clever or they're lazy. And as someone who's focused on children with disabilities, that's an interesting distinction. There's not a lot of room for diversity. So this is pretty familiar sight in many schools in Bhutan. This might not faze some of you that are familiar with this kind of way. As an American, this is very jarring to me, to see everyone's grades and marks up on a wall somewhere. That would never happen in an American school. So there's this competition value in Bhutanese schools at the moment. And I think this focus group excerpt from several students is telling. So I'm asking them, are you ever afraid in the classroom? The students say, yes, sir. I say, is that helpful or is it better if you weren't afraid of your teachers? The students say, helpful. I say, helpful. The students say, yes, sir. Student 3 says, if teachers are not strict, the students are talking, the teachers are trying to teach, the other students are making lots of noise, disturbing by throwing papers. If the teachers are strict, they will concentrate on studies. I say, what happens when you answer a question wrong? And the student 4 says, you feel nervous. And student 5 says, it is better not to make a mistake than to try. Which I think sums up a lot of the feeling of students in the moment. So teachers themselves are expressing more and more kind of anxiety around the system. So one teacher says, our students are taught to take exams, but they don't learn anything. So there's this kind of recognition, and perhaps this resignation, that we are preparing students to think in a certain way, but it's maybe not the way that is preparing them for a life as an adult, particularly as a learned or educated person. The technical and vocational educational system needs a lot of attention and work. There's some initiative there. There's little opportunity for youth with disabilities in particular. So as they move through the school system, if they are being included, what's next for them? And that's actually one of my major projects for the next 3 years is inclusive employment for youth with disabilities. And of course, there's a high unemployment rate for youth with at least a basic class 10 education. So these recommendations come from a book that I put together a couple of years ago. So myself and Tom Maxwell, who's an Australian researcher who's been engaged in Bhutan for a while, we want to see the quality of teachers improve in the teaching colleges. We want to expand inclusive provision that supports changes in curriculum and pedagogy. So the strong evidence suggests that by improving the inclusiveness of classrooms, you improve the quality of classrooms as well. Increase the quality of access to rural schools. To fully go all in on GNH, to really embrace that idea of the whole student and how do we support that within the school itself. Okay, not through a competitive culture of examinations, but through something different. And I think there's a real opportunity for Bhutan, that's 19 minutes, real opportunity in Bhutan to really push something new into the world, rather than mimic what's happened 100 years ago in education. And then really build that integration between tertiary and all levels of education, from early years to tertiary education. And then I'm just going to end on this quote from a student in our last fieldwork session in September. It's a little bit long, but I'll read it quickly. This is a student, so age 9. But what we have to do is being an educated person. We have to convey the message to our parents. We have to convey them, and we have to help them. We're not supposed to go and fight with them. We have to take our culture with us, because our culture is identity of our country, and it's in our hands to save it. And we have to go with the modern technologies, because we have to compete with the other modern world. So it's all in our hand. It's somewhat like understanding and belief that we need to create, and we must give a very strong support for our own creation. It's a very, very, very astute 9-year-old. This is a really interesting focus group in which they're talking about taking home books to their, this is a rural boarding school, so students were coming from a lot of different places and they're taking books home. And their parents saying, why are you reading these books? One student brought home a dictionary to help her complete an assignment. And the parents who were illiterate. So don't read this big book, will hurt your head. And she was trying to explain that this is a dictionary for words to look up, and she said, you can't read the dictionary. So it's very interesting that we got a whole conversation about religion and understanding and belief and parents versus children's ideas, and it was a very fascinating conversation. So if you're interested, you can, of course I think these will be shared, but there's lots of work I've done on Bhutan education. And just a little shameless plug for this book where some of this material happens. I'm merely the editor, so there's a lot of chapters by a lot of very prominent and famous Bhutanese researchers. And thank you very much, Tasha.